Probably seen some headlines about high-profile blockchain outages. So you could see a scenario in the future. Let's say you have a DeFi project or a GameFi project that's very successful, but then your blockchain is down for 5 hours. It's down for 8 hours. And then you have very, very upset customers and players and users who are mad at you. And this is a risk that you're taking by the blockchain you choose. The good thing is, one of the new really cool blockchain models is blockchain insurance. So you can actually get quotes, and I highly recommend you guys get insurance. So 2 best practices to start off: apply for a foundation grant and buy blockchain insurance. Okay, here we'll go into more specifically about tokenomics and game economics. Because Axie Infinity was the first one to come up with this play-to-earn model, the trend has been, I would say, more than 90% of the partners we work with just copied Axie's system. And so what's Axie's system? Okay, so a game economist has a dilemma that's very similar to what a central banker has. So a central banker will have a dual mandate. You'll read about this. The Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, will have to control inflation and reduce unemployment. And so that's the 2 things they're trying to go after. The problem is these 2 goals may be in conflict. So this is a version of the Phillips curve. It's basically saying you can't do both. You've got to pick one, and if you pick one, it will affect the other. A game economist will have a similar dilemma. So if you're the game economist, you're trying to control inflation, which has been a major problem, and you'll see some charts later with Axie, Thing Arena, and Peg Axie. At the same time, you're also trying to increase transactions. And how do you increase transactions? The way you increase transactions is usually, typically, minting and selling a lot of NFTs. But then, you may have a serious problem with NFT inflation. So here, I can give you one potential solution, but I want you to start thinking about the problem first, right? So the idea behind this presentation is that if you guys start thinking thoughtfully about these problems, you'll probably address it in a completely different way from the way I'm thinking about it, but we can start this dialogue. So, sorry, let me go back here. Okay, so the game economist needs to increase the number of NFT transactions, and you also probably need to limit the supply of NFTs, right? This is a very hard problem, and while you're pushing the game and you're trying to get incredible growth, there's always the temptation to keep pushing and minting NFTs. And as a buyer of NFTs, you should always be thinking very critically, what's the game economist trying to do? Are they serious about controlling inflation? Okay, we'll talk about token design, and should you have 1 or 2 tokens? This is the basic token system. So the governance token, there'll be a governance token and a utility token. The governance token will have a cap. It will have a maximum, and this is typically what the founders and the investors have. So what the rich people have. The utility token is what the players have. And this will typically not have a cap. The concern here is that you create a conflict of interest between the players against the owners and the investors and founders. The other problem is this system leads to inflation. And I'll give you some slides. If there's one takeaway from this, is that if you're a GameFi founder, please consider a different system. This is probably not the system that works best. So with Axie Infinity, their total utility token supply went above 40 billion. They were minting so many tokens. And on the right, you can see the token price. It's trading fractions of a penny now. And unfortunately, this is a pattern that we've seen in other games. So in the last year, there have been a few other games from Vietnam that have gotten serious traction. This is Thetan Arena. Thetan Arena had one of the best hype videos, was a very polished game, but followed the exact same design as Axie Infinity. And they had a maximum price, and now their token price is well below 1 cent. Peg Axie, similar trend, right? And Amazon would say this is a one-way door decision. When you go through the door, it's very hard to come back and undo this decision. So before you make this choice of following this model, think long and hard. Do you have a way to avoid this? And my argument here is that this is probably unavoidable if you follow this token design. So is there a better option? Well, okay. So typically when we get to this part of the conversation, a founder will raise their hand and say, well, I've got a good idea to deal with inflation. My idea is to have burning mechanisms. And so you'll have a long list of ways to burn the coin. And you'll include these things in the game. So there'll be greedy mechanisms, you'll charge a fee for changing your name. If you change the skins of your game character, then you'll get charged a tax. And for a game developer, this makes sense, right? But from the player perspective, this is a tax on fun, right? This could be a long list of the reasons why your game dies eventually, right? And this is an exercise that we've gone through with customers where we're helping them write their white paper. Many games have this section in their white paper of how to deal with inflation. But if you're writing it from the founder perspective, please be more thoughtful about how it affects your players. Okay, so the solution I have is borrowed from Milton Friedman. This is a K% idea. The idea is that you have a single token and you expand the monetary supply by some number. Here we'll call it K, but it's up to you. You can choose 3, 4, 5%. Milton Friedman was a hardcore libertarian. He did not like central banks. He did not like central authorities. The reason I'm telling you about this is that I know many of you feel very strongly about decentralization. If you feel very strongly about decentralization, or you're kind of lazy and you don't want to think of these decisions, you can automate it using a K% rule. And the funny thing is, I've probably talked about this with 20 or more GameFi founders, and no one has taken me up on this. If you want to try this, let me know, and I'd love to be an advisor on your project. Okay, the other trend we're seeing a lot of is staking and total value, total value locked up, TVL. I'm seeing these trends for startups that have nothing to do, where the staking and the TVL functions have nothing to do with the gameplay or the economics. One of the ideas I hear a lot is, it's important for us to have a staking function as a way to indicate that we have a loyal community. I'm showing you the chart for Terra Luna, right? This is actually Terra Luna's TVL before everything went down. And so many of you guys probably know, many of you actually maybe you were lunatics yourself and lost some money from this. What I'm trying to show here is that having a high TVL number is not a guarantee that your project is going to be successful, right? And you need to ask yourself, is the reason you had a high TVL number, is it because people loved your project, or is it because you were offering very, very high rewards? If you're offering APY of above 10%, is that really sustainable? And is that the reason you have such a high TVL number? Okay. Okay. I'll do a quick overview of the ICO process. For many of you, this might be new, and you might be thinking, you might be trying to consider, are you going to raise money from a venture capital fund or go through an ICO? And the main idea here is that you're raising money, and a traditional startup will raise money through a process that involves going through friends and family, accelerators, incubators, seed funding, Series A, B, C, and D. And if you're like Airbnb, it can take you over a decade, 10 plus years. The ICO IDO process inverts this process. You end up raising from the public markets from the very beginning. And this is a really important decision you guys have to make. Many of you are probably thinking, this is great, this is easy money, I can't wait to do this, how do I sign up? What we want to warn you about is that you'll have the pressure of a publicly traded company very early on. So you may be 6 months into your project and having people on Twitter harassing you because you haven't hit your benchmarks. And so this is a problem we've seen on and on. And one of the ways that we can come in and help you out is introduce you to investors and trying to advise you on how much you should raise and when you should raise. Okay. And this is a chart of Airbnb. And this was Airbnb's fundraising path. And this is the path that, when you talk about traditional fundraising and traditional VCs, this is what Airbnb did, right? Airbnb is not that old of a company, but this is the process that ended up getting disrupted in the ICO process. Okay, so some of the founders here I've spoken with about trying different business models, and we've talked a lot about GameFi, but I'd like to introduce some other business models that you can consider as well. Okay, and these are fundraising amounts for some startups in Vietnam that have been very successful raising through the ICO IDO process. Okay, I mentioned insurance earlier. So this is I would consider this part of decentralized finance, DeFi. The great thing about insurance companies is you're getting premiums up front, and there are all sorts of things in the crypto world that you can insure against. You can insure against Terra Luna collapsing. You can insure against state ETH and ETH diverging too far. And you can get insurance on blockchains having additives. We're talking from AWS's perspective, but Web3 is trying to disrupt us as well. And so there are some decentralized cloud companies. Alchemy and Fura are probably the most high profile. Blockdaemon provides staking as a service. Okay, and then I have a warning here. For a lot of the new projects, you may be tempted to use market makers. And one thing I've noticed when I'm talking to founders, we'll talk about protecting the token price. I notice many of you will spend significant amounts of money, sometimes $20,000 a month, if not more. And you may not think very much about how are they actually protecting your price. I think the most obvious reason or way they're doing this is wash trading. So one concern is, are they just trading between themselves in different wallets? And so if you're already at this point where you're considering using a market maker to protect your price, you may already be in trouble. Okay, so final thoughts. How can AWS be helpful? As I mentioned before, we have a white paper editing service. And here, you send me the white paper, I'll edit it, and I'll get you comments back, and hopefully I'll be helpful there. The most common question is, does this cost any money? No, we'll actually provide you with AWS credits. So it's going to be the opposite. One caveat is, because we're offering you credits, don't expect me to get back to you in 3 days. Right now I've got a long queue right now. But this is something where we're happy to help. Okay, so just a quick summary. We provide credits, your foundation grants, white paper editing, and we can talk to you about your token design. Okay, that's it for me. If you want to contact me, I'm on Telegram and Twitter, and I'll be here after 5, so it seems like a lot of you have cool projects. I'd love to hear about them. Thanks for having me.
Thanks Don. Ok, trước khi chúng ta bước vào phần panel discussion, nơi mà những thông tin vừa rồi được đem lên bàn hội đàm, thì chúng ta sẽ có 2 phút cho quảng cáo, nơi mà iOS sẽ giới thiệu về những offer credit mà chúng ta sẽ exclusive cho buổi ngày hôm nay. Xin mời anh Lực, đại diện team